This is Rick. Hello and welcome to Champion Individual Rights, where I always focus on the importance of individual rights with the understanding that every individual should have a right to their own life, privacy, and possessions, regardless of their ethnicity or the geography upon which they preside. Today, we live in a world where politicians are behaving as if individual rights do not even exist. What can we do to turn this situation around? We have to begin by digesting reality in a moral context. This is the formula that has been used to control the human race for thousands of years. This contamination takes place within the forming process of understanding. It is while you are at a young, vulnerable age that the force of government moves in and begins programming you with many ill-conceived perceptions so that they can control the way you think about things. It consists of a contaminated thought process filled with contradictions, an illusionary world void of moral cognition where words often have no intrinsic meaning, leading to a state of mind where reality is not deciphered in a moral context. Everything is propped up through the good goal fallacy, which implies that the goals of politicians are so high, that their goals are so lofty that they can do anything that they want in order to achieve their goals. In reality, the higher your goals are and the more people that they affect, all the more important that the means of obtaining your goals be good. Today's focus is going to be on the U.S. politicians are fighting a war on terrorism illusion. Recently, Donald Trump has been ridiculed by the press for suggesting that Hillary Clinton was the founder of ISIS. I've known for quite some time now that U.S. politicians have been in the business of manufacturing terrorist groups such as ISIS. For those many Americans that still don't want to digest the reality of this situation, in a newly released WikiLeaks of Hillary Clinton emails from 2014, it states, quote, "We need to use our diplomatic and more traditional intelligence assets to bring pressure on the governments of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, which are providing clandestine financial and logistic support to ISIL and other radical Sunni groups in the region." Let's digest this reality in a moral context, which is something the United States government does not want you to do. U.S. politicians have been claiming that they are fighting a war against terrorism, when in reality, they have been funding and arming them with weapons all along. There is documentation that ISIS has killed an estimated 300,000 people in Iraq and Syria alone, and they have been charged with committing crimes against humanity. According to the U.S. ally Saudi Arabia, the Saudis have admitted to creating ISIS along with the CIA. The 28 pages that were classified until recently also prove that Saudi Arabia had ties to 911. This is proof that U.S. politicians covered up the fact that their ally Saudi Arabia had a role in 911. They went on to falsely accuse Iraq of having ties to bin Laden and 911 and proceeded to bring massive death, destruction, and suffering to the Iraqi people by the millions. The definition of treason, quote, "the crime of betraying one's country," unquote. Important fact of reality. Your masters get away with lying to you, not your public servants. The State Department makes the claim that one of their main goals is to promote for human rights around the world. In reality, U.S. politicians dehumanized the Iraqi people to the point where they could even lie about why they were sending them to their deaths and destroying their cities. By these findings, they are also guilty of crimes against humanity in many countries around the world in regards to their connections with ISIS. So, what should the U.S. politicians do next? There was only one logical thing that they can and should do. Admit up to the fact that war is insane and put an end to it. The first casualty of war is the truth. People have been programmed for thousands of years that they have to keep fighting for their freedoms in these wars. Otherwise, everyone else that has been fighting for their freedoms in past wars would have died in vain. In reality, when you die fighting in wars over what amounts to be imaginary perceptions, you are dying in vain. If it is acknowledged that this has been going on for thousands of years, By putting an end to it, it is possible that the politicians could be seen as heroes. It has been estimated that throughout known history, wars have killed an estimated 1 billion people, and in just the last century alone, in accordance with the University of Hawaii, wars have claimed the lives of 262 million people. That's over 250 million. This is a moral dilemma, and a moral dilemma requires a moral solution. They have to begin by digesting reality in a moral context and call for a ceasefire worldwide to all military activity, and that would include the terrorist organizations that they have been controlling. They should immediately begin promoting for the recognition of individual rights on a global basis, with the goal of achieving world peace. They should also implore the political leaders around the world to do likewise, and begin promoting for the recognition of individual rights on a global basis, with the understanding that every individual should have a right to their own life, privacy, and possessions, regardless of their ethnicity or the geography upon which they preside. If U.S. politicians were to start digesting reality in a moral context and take these steps, they could be seen as heroes from this day forward. I can imagine a huge celebration taking place around the world if they were to do the right thing. It's time to start fighting and promoting for the rights of the people of the world. There is no reason to continue following in the errant footsteps of our forefathers. The moral law applies to all rational creatures necessarily, to all of the human race, and that would include the political leaders of the world. It must be recognized that the politicians should be bound to the same laws of the conscience that the average individual is bound to. It is only through our moral cognition and our ability to digest reality in a moral context that mankind can achieve its ultimatum: world peace through the recognition of individual rights on a global basis. Free your mind from the contamination that has plagued mankind for thousands of years. Now is a time for a peaceful revolution of thought.